If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Alrighty, welcome to another edition, the July the 14th edition of the Counter Racist Code Show, also called the CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller and yours truly, Mr. Bobby, as your co-host. Thank you for your listenership. We have our people all on the line, all ready to go, including that suspected person who just tuned in, who monitors the show. Anyway, very, very glad to have you on. And let's do this. To get in contact with the show, call 516-453-9921. And when you do, hit the number 1 button, and you will go to the top of the line, or you're next in line for your question to be answered. Make sure that you give the screener your name so that I can properly identify you, and then we'll go right into that, and Mr. Fuller will get to you as soon as he can. Okay, please, ma'am. Please, sir. A lot to talk about. Phone lines are already jammed up already, but let's do this. Mr. Fuller, got a question from Jasmine. She says this. She said, Mr. Fuller, I have started to read the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, the 2016 edition. I have a question for the statement that was made below on page 93. And it says this: if being remembered by the, quote, general public, end of quote, after you are dead is important to you, say the following to yourself and say it often. Here's the quote: if I'm not remembered for solving problems without making any, I am probably not worth remembering, end of quote. Mr. Fuller, can you please further explain this, as I do not want to assume? Your response, Mr. Fuller, would greatly be appreciated. I hope you're taking care of yourself during these unprecedented times. Best regard, Jasmine.
The answer to the question is, the question being, if I am not remembered for solving problems without making any, that's making any problems, I am probably not worth remembering. Now, I want people to remember that everything presented in the code book is optional for the reader. You can adopt that slogan for yourself if you see fit to do so. I have adopted it. That's why I put it in there, along with wanting other people to look at it and see if they will adopt that slogan as applied to themselves, because this is entirely democratic, as they say, quote, unquote, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. It operates on, quote, unquote, democratic principles, meaning you select whatever it is that you see in the code books, in the code volumes, or anything that you adopt as a code based on what you see fit to do. So, in answer to the question, if I understand the question, what does this mean? It means exactly what it says. You're probably not worth remembering if you are not being remembered for solving a problem. You're probably not worth being remembered. Why does memory exist in the first place? Memory exists about correcting mistakes, for the most part. That's why we have a thing called memory, so that you don't keep making the mistakes over and over again that you made before, because everybody makes mistakes. And so you want to remember not to do certain things that can be considered a mistake. That's how we get the result of our actions being what is called progress, all down through the history of the universe. That applies to people. That applies to creatures, animals. Animals make mistakes. They try to remember the mistakes that they made so that they don't make those same mistakes again. Creatures that are not familiar with fire probably paid the price of not being familiar with fire and got burned. In the case of some furry animals, they probably, their fur caught on fire because they weren't familiar with fire. They got too close to a fire, a forest fire that was made, because the creature was in the forest where the fire was. A bolt of lightning started a fire. They probably never experienced that. So that creature got singed. So the creature maybe perished because it caught fire. But then if it didn't, that creature would have to remember there is such a thing as fire, and it can be dangerous. It can render service, or it can render a disservice. So if you go through this entire existence, because we're sent here, presumably, according to the code, to a place called Earth, and we're given hands, fingers, feet, a heart, a brain, etc., 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 to do what? Solve problems. Now, how do we know that we have all this first-class equipment to solve problems? How do we know, or we can reason, that that's what all this equipment is for? Solving problems without making any. How do we know that for sure? Because we have problems to solve. Everybody has problems to solve each and every day. You're assigned problems. That's how you know the problems you're supposed to be solving. They're put right in front of you. The problem you're supposed to be solving is always put right in front of you. So you just look at that problem and say, how can I go about solving this problem? Because that is my assignment. How do I know that's my assignment? Because it's right there in front of me. I can't get around it. I keep trying to move around the problem, and the problem, even when I try to run away with it, it's still there. That's how you know your assignment is to solve that problem. So that's why that entry is in there. Okay. That's the explanation for it. So right. Why would anybody remember you if you're not using the equipment that you have been given to solve problems rather than to make problems? If all you're known for when you leave this planet is be a troublemaker, a problem maker, always going around looking for a way to make problems, you shouldn't be remembered except for making problems. But how many people make problems that need to be remembered when problem making is very common, more than problem solving?
Yes, sir. Okay, Jasmine, thank you for your Gmail. Let's go right. Oh, by the way, speaking about Gmails, if you elect to Gmail me today, here is the address, 7, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. I need you to bear in mind that if you elect to use that, more than likely your Gmail will not be read. There's at least 55, 60, maybe 70 Gmails ahead of you, and we have to take them, or I'm going to take them in order. So if you do that, it's probably not going to get read today. However, at some point in time in some up-and-coming shows, it will be read. So just keep in mind when you elect to do that. Okay, Now, let's go to the phone calls, and let's see. We're going to have Aaron. Aaron, you're up with Mr. Fuller, and you can be heard worldwide. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. I have two questions. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Just one today because we're so stacked up here. But go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fuller, the last couple of weeks, I'll be very honest in saying that when you were speaking about being pathetic as black people, I did get into my emotions. However, I had to go directly back to the code book. And on page 106 of the old code book, it states that racist man and racist woman are the direct and indirect functional cause of all widespread and long-lasting malice and confusion and all hunger and envy among all the people of the known universe. So my question, Mr. Fuller, is that would it be accurate that sometimes I would say would it be accurate that black people are not necessarily pathetic, but we are extremely confused about how much effort is needed and time and energy is needed to counter the system of white supremacy?
Yes, a lot of effort. Probably not a lot of time is needed. Time is kind of what we call neutral, you might say. What is time? Time is deed. So if you just put your shoulder to the wheel, I mean, once you find out what the code is for solving a problem, which is all it really is about, the race problem is just another problem that everybody's been tiptoeing around and stepping around and running from and whatnot, and nobody just saying, hey, let's get rid of this thing before 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Get rid of it. I mean, it's been dragging on this nonsense about beating up on people and mistreating people and arguing about what color somebody is. Let's get off of that standard and get off of it like right this minute. That's all it really takes. It doesn't take a lot of head scratching to do that. It's a formula. Racism is a formula that's very simple. It's put together. Its simplicity is right in your face. It's nothing complicated about racism. They say it's complicated. Some people say that. Well, you know, there's a lot of complexities to it. No. Racism is just mistreating people based on color. That's all it is. And there's nothing new about mistreatment to start with. I mean, 6-year-olds can kind of perceive mistreatment, even if they can't articulate it. So all we have to do is just codify it to say, well, now we got something that's put together by people. People can take it apart. So how is it put together? It's all about stop doing certain things and start doing other things. That's all it takes. How you speak and how you act.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Codify
Aaron,
everything that you do. Like everything that works is codified.
Okay. Aaron, go ahead with your second question because I see where I have a space here. So go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, on page 113 at the bottom of the code book, it's one of the most powerful things you have. The old one, Mr. Bobby.
Oh, the old one. Okay.
One. Yeah, it's fine, but I'm going to read directly, Mr. Bobby. I'll be clear.
Okay.
It says that to the extent that a racist has anything to do with it, justice will not be done. To the extent that a racist has anything to do with it, the peace talks could not lead to peace. To the extent that a racist has anything to do with it, non-white people should not be surprised at the outcome. That last one, that is a major one that I think black people get confused about, which is every time we see non-justice happening, is it accurate to say that every time we see non-justice, we should automatically say it was probably the white supremacists?
Yes, you always suspect the white supremacists because why? They are the smartest and most powerful people on the planet. Now, a lot of people feel very upset about that, but this is not about people's feelings.
Right.
Like black people particularly have to get rid of this. Well, don't say things like that. Don't say white supremacy. Call it something else. Well, why? Why call it something else other than what it is? So people will respond and have responded to me when I've said it, when I've said white supremacy down through the years. And the answer is always, because it makes me feel bad.
Mm.
Well, according to the code, first thing you want to know about anything that's said about anything is it true? Now, some people have said, well, no, that's not true. That's not true. But then I say, okay, well, if that's not true, what is true?
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, nobody tells me what to do. And now we got another question. Is that true? Nobody
Right.
tells you what to do. I mean, the whole time you've been on this planet, even if it's 5 minutes, nobody ever told you what to do, and you had to do it. Well, now, you know, all questions have answers. That's either yes or no. Either you're going to make up something or you're going to tell the truth. And the way to solve any problem is to face the truth.
That's right.
Any problem that's ever been solved in history came from people who were courageous enough, if you want to use that term. I just simply say you don't have to have courage to face the truth. Just look at the truth, and if you see that's the truth, just tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Black people use that term all the time. Tell it like it is. But if somebody says white supremacy, well, don't tell that. Say something else. Why? To make me feel better. And that is always fatalistic. That's suicide. When you can't face the truth just because your feelings got hurt, then you are not going to be a problem solver nowhere on this planet ever if you keep that type of mentality.
Okay. All right, Aaron,
Bobby.
thank you for your call, and don't be a stranger. All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Fuller, I had quite a few people. Of course, I didn't argue with them, but they were very, I would say upset would be the word, or didn't understand, or maybe even confused about a statement that you have made over these airwaves, and also when you and I did the shows on Talktainment, you've addressed this particular statement many times. I can't even count them, but the statement was is you were speaking about the white man's anus, and people just can't get with that. So, could you explain that to those that have heard it, to those who are listening, to those who want to know? What do you mean when you talk about the white man's anus is the new vagina?
Well, I've heard people actually praising that as being part of the new sexuality, getting rid of all the old sexualities, male with female, and look at new ventures in sexuality, that we need more variety, more what they call diversity in sex, not only in economics, in education, in entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion. People are saying in these modern days, we need more diversity, diverting from what to what in order to do what. And they say, well, the white male anus probably needs to take place of the black female vagina. Then we'll reduce all these black babies that's coming into the world, making trouble. And at the same time, you can get sexual pleasure maximum. Get an improved version of sexuality. Because the white male anus, which white people are kind of looked up to in the system of white supremacy by all people of color, all right? So the white male anus maybe should take the place of the black female vagina, which we should look upon as being kind of obsolete anyway. Who needs that? I mean, black females can play with that with each other and give them that type of assignment. That'll keep them busy. See, that's the philosophy behind that, all right? And we can take them and put them in the army even, and they'll hug each other and go marching off somewhere to fight whomever the white supremacists say is an enemy. See, they got a long-range plan for everybody, Okay, so that's where the code says all of this is going, if that is answering the question. That's why I made that statement. I'm just pointing out what people are parading in the street. Well, you think they're parading, they say, well, we got a flag here called the rainbow flag. And so, okay, flags and statues being pulled down and some being put up. You say, well, what does that mean? Is this whole parade about a flag? No, it's not just about a flag. The flag is representative. Representative of what? Of the new sexuality, or the old sexuality with new wheels on it. And you say, okay, well, what is the old sexuality and what is the new sexuality? Oh, anything that you want to make it. And the white male anus is a part of the new sexuality. Let's shift the focus and say, well, anuses have been around for some time. I mean, everybody's got one. Animals, all kind of creatures got anuses. So what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about doing things on a grand scale with anuses and kind of putting vaginas to the sideline, except, of course, for the supreme vagina, the holy grail of vaginas. You say, well, what's the holy grail of vaginas? The white female vagina. That's the holy grail of all vaginas. Without that, there is no civilization. So you want to worship that. But the black female vagina, nah. You can replace that with the white male anus, and nobody will miss it. That's the philosophy of the white supremacists. That's where they're steering black people, and they're doing a roundabout way of doing it, but that's what it all is going to add up to. When you draw a line on all those figures and add it up, that's what you're going to come up with.
Okay.
The white male anus is the new black vagina. That's what they're going to come up with out of all of this. Watch it.
Okay. Here's I don't know if it's a statement or whatever, from Naomi. She says this, Mr. Fuller, are you aware of a black paramilitary group called the Black Buffers?
No, I'm not.
Okay. According to my research, the Black Buffers was a paramilitary security force created in 1968 by a group of wealthy white businessmen and a fundamentalist Christian organization. The dashiki-wearing Black Buffers were tasked with patrolling the inner city of Washington, D.C. to preach black capitalism instead of black power. They are credited with establishing a martial arts program for boys and a charm school for girls. However, they also spied on black militant organizations. Soon after the Buffers' formation, an all-white evangelical Christian organization called Young Life was placed in authority over them. The goal was to fold the Buffers into Young Life to create a diversity program. The whole program was shut down in roughly a year after order had been returned to Washington. Unfortunately, Mr. Fuller, I think similar strategies will be used in 2020. This cycle will repeat itself until black people learn the lessons of history and develop a constructive code of contact. Now, Mr. Fuller, you live in Washington, D.C. I don't know how long that you have lived there. This was in 1968, and we do know that it was some turbulent times here in Ohio. I know I was part of the situation that happened up in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Huff area, and I did see National Guard that paraded down the streets and to restore order. I saw the tanks and the military they said to restore order. Now, you were there, and you say that you don't remember this group?
I don't remember. I've never heard of them, but
Okay.
there are probably thousands of groups all over the world. So
Mm-hmm.
the codified approach is just to say white supremacists, racist white supremacists. That's it. And regardless of how they chop it up and have different groups doing this, different white supremacists going on different assignments. I mean, it's all over the place. It runs into the thousands. So the labels don't really matter too much because white supremacy is just white supremacy. There's different expressions of it. Different people have different assignments. They carry out these assignments just like you would in any well-run political and religious machine, which is what white supremacy is. So just call it white supremacists. They are doing this today, and and Tuesday's schedule calls for this and that and the other, and next month's schedule calls for another typical operation under a new banner name. So they'll just continue to do that because that's what they do. That's what makes them a smooth running operation, And they confuse their victims by this putting new names on old operations. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Okay, look in here. Let's see who's next. Okay, let's do this. Okay, this is from Gigi. She says this, Dear Mr. Fuller, non-white people who accept worship and obey the Christian God, and she put small g, as their deity, and accept the Bible as the word of that deity, also accept slavery or mistreatment because that's written in the Bible that they accept. How can people both accept slavery and justify it with the Bible and at the same time seek to produce justice when these two things contradict one another?
Do not get into any argument with anybody about any religion, period. Always have 3 questions ready when any discussion about religion starts. Just 3 questions. And accept the answers for what they are. Don't argue about the answers that you get. Just if you can ask more questions, but no arguments about religion except the religion of white supremacy. That's according to the code. So what are the 3 questions that you ask when religion is brought up, period? When anybody starts talking about the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or the various Hindu religious books, Buddhist books, Confucianist books, all of the different tribal religions, of which there are probably hundreds and hundreds or maybe thousands, because a lot of different tribes have their own religions. So you got a lot of religious controversy all the time, and it causes a lot of conflict. So therefore, the code says you slice right through all of that. So it won't be any arguments or no conflict about it, simply by doing the simplest things, and that is those 3 questions that are listed in the religious section of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And those 3 questions are, what is the name of your religion? That's what you ask people. The minute they start talking about religion, you say, wait a minute, hold it right there. I mean, before you start talking about Nebuchadnezzar or the Sermon on the Mount or what Jesus said, what his last words were and all that. No, I'm not going to get into that, okay? And you say, I have 3 questions. What is the name of your religion? Because most religions have names. And let the person answer. So that's question number 1. Question number 2. What does your religion require you to do in all 9 areas of activity? Not somebody else to do, but what does it require you to do, since it's your religion? In economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, other people's religions, sex, and war. What does your religion require you to do? and try to pick a time when the person has plenty of time to explain what his or her religion requires him or her to do in all of those 9 areas.
Okay.
Then the third question is, and the last one is, what does your religion require you to do when you interact with me?
Okay.
And listen very carefully to the answers, and that's all you want to know ever about anybody's religion.
Okay. Got to hold it right there because we have to do this. We have to do this station break. Okay, you are now listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Every Tuesday we do this from 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. Eastern Time. To get in contact with the show, call 516-453-9921. When you do that, hit the number 1 button, and when you do, call screener will come on. Make sure that you give them your name so that I can properly introduce you. Also, if you choose not to use that method but like to Gmail me, you can. The numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And your Gmail will be read. It may not and probably will not be read that particular day, but at some point in time in up and coming shows, it will be read. Just keep that in mind if you choose that method. But again, you are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. right here. And he will be talking about how you can get in contact also with books and other material that is pertinent to your study. When he talks about that, all that is on ProduceJustice.com. Okay, let's see here. Got that out the way. Let me go right here. Okay, Darnell, you are buffering up here. Darnell, you are on with Mr. Fuller, and you can be heard worldwide. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Mr. Fuller, my question today is, if a white person thinks that white supremacy does not exist, is it safe to assume that that person is a white supremacist?
Yes. The code says also that any person who is classified as white lets you know that they're classified as white, then you are automatically suppose you're duty bound. If you're a victim of white supremacy, you're automatically duty bound to suspect that that person could be a white supremacist if the person is able to be one. And if the person identifies him or herself as a white person, and that person is able to be a white supremacist, then that person should be automatically suspected of being one. Until when? Until proven not to be one. Proven to whom? Only to you. Even if they prove it to the entire world, but they didn't prove it to you, they're still on the suspect list. That's the United Independent Code requirement. If everybody vouches for the person, you don't go by that. Why? Because the white supremacists are very deceptive. They can fool everybody in the room. And if you go along with that, but you have doubts, you stick with your doubts until that person proves it to you that he or she is not a racist. That's the way that's got to work. I cannot vouch for any white person on this planet as being not a racist. Why? Because that white person may have succeeded in fooling me. And then wants me now, because the white supremacists are skillful at that. They'll get a few black people to believe that they are not racist, and then use those black people to go out and fool the rest of the black people. So the code says no non-white person can vouch for a white person in the system of white supremacy as not being a racist. You're not qualified to do that, according to the code. A white person has an uphill fight all the way in the system of white supremacy, and it's not the non-white person's fault. It's not black people's fault. The system of white supremacy set that kind of criteria. So every individual white person has to prove to each individual black person that he or she is not a racist, according to the code. No exceptions.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darnell, and don't be a stranger. Let me just say this. Cadillac Joe is in the chat room, and Cadillac Joe, I will say this. If you keep listening to the program, if you keep listening, because this is the first time that I have seen your name come up, there could be some things in here that you might learn or you might not, but you certainly are entitled to the opinion that you gave in the chat room. It's okay. It's okay. We're all here to learn something. So if that's the way you feel, then that's the way you feel, and it's okay. Just want to acknowledge that, because we are not going to talk about you. We invite all to call into the show and to see what you can see. So thank you, for your listenership or even for your chat. Okay, let's see here. Let me see here. Where are we going to go to next? Okay, the usual suspect is listening. I say that because this show is being monitored, but that's okay. The one thing about it is the truth is being told, and Mr. Fuller presents the evidence. So whatever he's saying, it could be backed up by the evidence. Now, you don't have to agree with it, but it is there if you choose to look at it. Bunbo says this to Mr. Fuller. He said, Mr. Fuller, did your family easily understand and accept your seeing them as your care unit instead of your family? And do they agree with your code system concept? Thank you.
Well, I'll answer the question broadly.
Okay.
Everything in the code has to be accepted or rejected by each and every non-white person based on how they see it. So it's not a matter of being a dictatorship or being disappointed even. You just ask people what they're willing to go along with. These are fellow prisoners. So no prisoner of war, victims of white supremacy, prisoners of the system of white supremacy, can dictate to another prisoner about how to look at things and what to accept and what to reject. It's not dictatorship. It's all voluntary. So if a person, and the code says, you always call people by the titles and names that they want to be called. So if a person says, well, you say don't use the term family, and you suggest that we call ourselves a care unit. And I want to use the traditional term. I mean, yeah, we care about each other, but I don't like changing the name. I want to keep the name family. I like the term family. I feel comfortable with the term family. And so I don't want us to call ourselves a care unit. Well, the person who says that, you regard that. You say, because the code says you call people by the names and titles that they want to be called, even if they change it 15 times a day. You'll say, okay, well, what's your name today? Or what do you want to be called today? That even comes down to individuals' names, or what their status is. Just whatever it is. That's why the code says if you suspect that a white person is a white supremacist, you never call a white person a white supremacist, except when that white person says, yes, I am a white supremacist, and I expect you to call me that, and that's what I am. That's what I intend to be. Then you can call that white person a white supremacist. But if the white person says, no, don't you call me a white supremacist, don't you call me a racist, that's not what I am. So you don't call them that. But you can always say, I suspect that you could be one. Now, you can say that. Because, see, that's not name calling. That's showing your suspicion. And that's how you always say it. I suspect you could be one. Why? Because I have no reason to believe that you're not one. You know, that's the way that's got to work in the system of white supremacy. So, in direct answer, that I won't get too far away from that, to your question about people in your family wanting to be called family members and not part of a care unit, you just say, okay, all right. So, you know, because the whole idea is you don't escalate conflict if you can de-escalate it.
Okay. Before we got about 5 minutes outside our 15-minute or rather 45-minute area where we talk about your book. So let's go to Mr. Petrus. He says this, Mr. Fuller, can white people also be victims of the system of white supremacy if they are not white supremacists?
No. No white person can be a victim of white supremacy. That's a contradiction. You're not a victim of white supremacy. You can be a victim of mistreatment, but it's not on account of you're white. White people don't mistreat white people because they're white in the system of white supremacy. They mistreat them for other reasons. The problem is that they are not acting like they think a white person should, but they're talking about the act, not the coloration or the lack of coloration, many people will say, the absence of color. That white, when you're talking about racism, many people say you're talking about unlike, talking about crayons or something like that. You're talking about the absence of color. White, in the system of white supremacy, is considered to be the absence of color. That's why they call non-white people colored people, meaning they have color. So white must mean you don't have color. White is not a color in the system of white supremacy when you're talking about people. When you're talking about paint, yes, you go into a paint store and you say, I want some white paint. There's even such a thing called off-white. Now, I don't know how far off you can, 2 inches, 5 inches, 37 feet. What do you mean off-white? How far off? Over the cliff? White? I mean, what are you talking about? But see, that's talking about paint. So it gets kind of complicated, which anything dealing with color in the system of white supremacy can be made to be complicated, but the white supremacists make it that way.
Okay.
Particularly when it comes to talk about shades of color in people. Like they say black people and brown people. Well, look at this. When you look at huge numbers, millions of black people, they are not only brown, I mean, some of them look like they're white. Huge numbers, but they're black. Adam Clayton Powell is black. But everybody said he looks exactly like a white man. But Adam Clayton Powell was black.
All righty.
Well, Adam Clayton Powell looks nothing like Marcus Garvey.
No.
Okay?
He does not.
But he's classified as black. See, but that goes to show you what the system of white supremacy does. See, it causes what? Confusion. So the victims of racism should never be confused.
Okay.
So we say 3 categories: non-white people and white supremacists. Those are the 3 categories when it comes to race. There are no others.
All righty. I'm going to do this. At this particular time, 9:44 here, and in the concept called the United States in the Northwestern Hemisphere. Again, this program is worldwide, and Cadillac Joe says that he's listening from Sydney, Australia, so we are glad for that. We know that Walter is also listening in Denmark. We appreciate that. Let's see here. Let's do this. It's 9:45, and this is the time that we have Mr. Fuller speak about the book. Mr. Fuller, take it away.
Yes, you can get the book, and that would include a whole lot of things that the callers are talking about, and I'm always talking from, for the most part, by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. And what will come up on the screen is a brief description of the textbook for victims of white supremacy, and there's a second volume, and that is a word guide. It's supposed to be all one book, but I couldn't get everything in one book, unfortunately. I'll try to work that out in the future where I can probably do that. And also, because some people have asked for it, there's an original 1984 edition, but the 2016 edition, which is Say So 2016 on the cover, is the latest edition that takes in most of the things, or nearly all of the things in the 1984 edition. But some people want the 1984 edition. Some people want all three, the Word Guide, the 2016 edition, and the 1984 edition. But that's all personal choice. But the basic book is the 2016 edition. You can get them by going to producejustice.com. And the book is supposed to be designed to tell you what to do in everyday situations, what words to use when you're on the job, what to say, what to do when somebody calls you the N word, all of that. What to do, like we covered some parts of it, about when a religious discussion comes up. And what you want to do is just get the things real fast and with the utmost efficiency. That's what the book is supposed to help you do. You'll be the most efficient person in handling every racial situation that comes up, directly or indirectly, anything connected with race. You're supposed to be the most efficient person present through the use of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. That's what I wrote it for. Now, that might not be the result, but when that is not the result, then whatever is in this book has failed in its mission, because it's not supposed to fail. And like the three examples I gave about religion, people argue about religion almost into infinity. They have wars about it. I mean, go at each other. Sometimes people of the same religion go at each other, gunning each other down, hitting each other over the head with the Bible, all of that type of thing. Book for Victims of Racism is supposed to slice all through that in about 5 minutes or less. And that is by just those three things that I've put out here in this program today. Just three questions. You just tell people, hey, I'm not going to get into a religious discussion, period. I just got three questions. What is the name of your religion? What does your religion require you to do in all the 9 areas of activity? And what does your religion require you to do when you interact with me? And that's all I ever want to know about your religion, because that's your religion, all right? I got my own, so we're not going to get in an argument about that. I just want to know what you're going to do when you interact with me. You don't have to tell me nothing else, because I don't even want to know nothing else, unless I want to know something else. All right.
All righty. So, again, we can get the book by going to where now?
Producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. Okay. Just follow the instructions that are given at that website, because you'll be able to get the books.
All righty. All righty. Let's do this. I'm going to do this. Let's see here. Okay, you're buffering up here. Okay, Bill, as soon as there we go. Bill, you're on with Mr. Fuller, and you can be heard worldwide. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. And
Good
thank
morning.
you for all you have done, Mr. Fuller, with this book. I have the book. I've had it for a very long time, and that's why I've been watching you, not really watching you, but just following your conversations online. But anyway, let me get to the point. I want to go to politics. I noticed in the book it doesn't really talk about where we should be in politics, should we run for office, those things. But in the section you said, do not refer to people as being rich or poor. Refer to them as being powerful or poor. And then you say that all persons in the known universe are, in their relationships to each other, either powerful or poor, none or rich. I'm going to shorten that up because it's on page 118 in the old book, and then it goes down what is rich and what is powerful. But my question to you would be, what do we need? And I don't mean will, because I think that's what you said about something else, which was we need the will. Okay, we need the will. We need a code. What else do we need to become powerful? Thank you.
What the question is, what else do we need to become powerful other than a code?
No. What else do we need besides your code and besides will? We have those two things. Do we need anything else to become powerful?
No, we need a code that makes us powerful. See, there's a way to get power. There's a way to become powerful. And the way that all people have become powerful is through knowledge and understanding. That's where power is. That's why the code book starts off saying what? If you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works in all of the 9 areas of activity, everything else that you understand will confuse you. And confused people will never be powerful. And black people are the most confused people on the planet about just about everything. Why? Because the system of white supremacy spreads confusion among black people. And as long as we are confused about what they are doing and how they do it, we're going to remain in the same shape that we're in forever. So if you don't understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works in all of the 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. If you don't understand how the white supremacists work in those 9 areas, like they're really working that thing about sex with us now, big time. They're just about as almost a done deal. Work how? Meaning causing confusion, okay? Because the white supremacists understand about sex. It's very powerful. Sex and religion. You're right. The 8th area of activity and the 7th area of activity in the textbook. They know that they can capture people's minds in sex and then substantially in religion. Man, they don't have to do anything in politics. I mean, everything is on automatic. Or entertainment. Or economics. They got you. Why? Because those are 2 powerful motivating forces. Religion is what? Strong beliefs backed up by action. So if the white supremacists get control of all of black people's strong beliefs, their religious beliefs, all right, get control of it. Steer it the way you want it to go, any kind of which way that you want it to go, all right? And then sex right next door to it, very powerful. People have sexual motivations. Catch them early enough, or even if you don't catch them early enough, catch them somewhere along the way, because the white supremacists know how to do that. You got them in everything else. You don't have to watch them. They'll be on automatic. The white supremacists understand that. They have a code, all right? That's why they're successful. Black people have to have a code for everything, not some things. You leave anything out, that's going to be a weak spot. So for everything that we do and say, we have to have a code. That's the missing link. We haven't had one. We got slogans, But a code is a complete plan. What do you do every time something happens? You should have a code for it. If there's any head scratching, it means that's your weak spot because you've got a question. Questions means that you don't have an answer. Because if you have an answer to a question, you don't have a question. Answers eliminate the question. Code is supposed to get the questions answered. Every possible question that can come up has a correct answer, and that is what you call progress. Black people haven't even sat down, like I'm attempted to do, for the most part, and try to write out a code. Meaning what? What do you do when you're on the job? Somebody comes to the lunch table, and it's a white person, and they use the N-word loud and clear. What do? You should have a code for it. That's absolute. Not this person doing this thing and the next person doing that thing and person over yonder reacting in a different way. Everybody got their own way of... No. It should be an exact way to react to that. Exact. And in the code book, I have a suggestion how everybody should react when the N-word is used. I have an outline that's supposed to be guaranteed to work. Okay? The best possible thing. Codification means you always do and say the best thing that will ever be done and said. That's what code means. The best thing that will ever be done and said in order to achieve a goal. That's what a code is. If it doesn't do and, achieve that goal that you set out to get, it shouldn't be in the code.
So the code will define everything that you need to do. Is that what you're saying?
Everything that has ever worked in the universe had a code. You cannot go to the moon and back without having an exact code. See, black people are the sloppiest people on earth when it comes to getting something done. Why? We don't have a code. Something comes up and we just do anything any kind of old way and hope that it works out. And the white supremacists look at that and say, that's a recipe for failure. All right, and we ain't about failing.
All right, Bill, thank you for your call. Do not be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, we have about a minute and 45 seconds before this first hour ends. Here's a question from the chat room that says, is the white man's anus replacing the black woman's vagina?
What does it say?
It says, is the white man's anus replacing the black woman's vagina?
In prior art, this is the white. I don't know whether that's really happening or not, but that's the white supremacist aim when it comes to sex here in the year 2020. Now, at other times, they'll have other aims and whatnot, but right now, that's one of their main priorities. They're going about doing it in a circular way, like they do everything. Like a deceiver always cloaks everything behind a whole bunch of fancy words called diversity and don't be don't be homophobic. And see, they got all kinds of things to dress up what they're really after, what they're really trying to do. See what I mean? So they'll rainbow it up. I mean, piggybacking off of what black people were saying back in the 1970s and 80s.
Alrighty.
Rainbow coalition. So they say, hey, we're rainbow too. Over here, come over here. We're rainbow. We're all a part of the same thing. It's all about civil rights.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
We have come to the end of the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and Mr. Bobby as co-host. Stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show. Thank you for listening. Africani, we got you right in there. Okay, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, also called the CRCS. You can get in contact with the show if you'd like by calling 516-453-9921 and let Mr. Fuller hear what you have to say, answer your question, or if you want to give thought, VGQ. Most people who listen to the show know what VGQ is, and that's another thing. You have to listen to the show or to the program to understand what is going on. I don't think you're going to get it just by tuning in one time, but it's here. Listen to it, and you may learn something because we are all still learning. If you'd like to also Gmail me, you can by doing this, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Chances are, though, that if you elect that, your Gmail will not be read on today's program, but it will be read on a future program. Now, some have entered into the chat room, and sometimes if they point it out to me, then I'm able to get one and read one. But basically, the calls come first, and then the Gmails, and then if I can get to the chat room, I will do that. And we do appreciate whatever it is that you have to say, because as you heard Mr. Fuller mention, there is no name calling, as practicing justice. You don't do that, but people elect to do that, and that's on them. But no, we don't do that. But anyway, those are the numbers, and that's how you can get in contact with the show. And speaking about VGQ, let's go to Justin. Justin, there you go. Got you on. You can be heard worldwide. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, Mr. Bobby. Hello, Mr. Fuller. I was listening last week, and Mr. Fuller asked the question, what do black people have that white people don't, you know what I'm saying, that we can offer them? And the only thing, I was listening to Francis Quest Wilson this morning, and the only thing we have that they don't, that they actually want, is our skin color. That's the only thing we have that is unattainable to them that they want is our skin color. And that's just my VGQ.
Okay. All righty. VGQ. Thank you very much, Justin, and do not be a stranger. Okay. Let's go here. Mr. Fuller, Fertland continues this. He says, Mr. Fuller, is your definition of response the same as the answer, since answers are supposed to solve questions, whereas responses don't always solve problems or questions?
So the question is, are the answers that I'm presenting the suggestions, are they the answers that will solve the problems?
I'm just reading it as he has said. It says, is your definition of response the same as answers, since answers are supposed to solve questions, whereas responses don't always solve problems or questions? That's how this person wrote that.
Oh, well, if I understand the question, everything, I'm going to say it again, the way I intend to say it, all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. Now, you can call the answers responses, but they are answers. I put them in the same category, response. Response to a question, a correct response to a question is the answer to the question. So all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. All problems. The race problem is a problem, the biggest problem on the planet, according to the United Independent Compensatory Counter-Racist Code. According to counter-racist logic, the race problem in the form of white supremacy is the greatest problem on the planet between people. Now, there are scientific problems and other problems and whatnot, etc., all kinds of problems. But the greatest problem between people is the problem of the system of white supremacy versus justice. That's the greatest problem among the people of the planet. So how do you solve that problem? Through the process of questions and answers. You ask enough questions and come up with enough answers, then the problem will be solved. That's the formula.
Okay. And I guess this happened a few shows back. I don't know if you can remember, but I'll just say this. It says this: did the person who responded, "Oh, wow," to your question about Jews identify himself as a Jew?
No. But
Okay.
The person who responded, "I pass," had identified himself as a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
There was two people there.
Oh,
One
okay.
person, to me, one person goes, I knew, went under the title of black as a racial identity. Okay? And that was the person who said, "Oh, wow."
Mm-hmm.
The other person had identified himself as a Jew. And he said, "I pass," in answer to the question. And the question was, for those who are not familiar with what the question was, I asked the question at a seminar that was titled Blacks and Jews. That was the title of the seminar. It lasted about 4 hours. Place was packed with what appeared to be white people and non-white people. Okay? So when I got the microphone, I asked the question. And the question was, I started off by making a statement, which is something I usually don't do, but I wanted clarity in giving the answer because I wanted to get an answer as fast as I possibly could, not to take up too much time. So I said, I have often heard the expression blacks and Jews, but I have never heard the expression Christians. Will either of the speakers care to comment? That was my question.
Mm-hmm.
And the black person said, "Oh, wow." Then there was silence. And that's since there wasn't anything else that he said.
Mm-hmm.
I turned to the other person who appeared to be a white male who had identified himself as a Jew. And he said, "I pass." And I said, "Thank you very much, gentlemen." And I sat down.
Okay.
Because there was people waiting in line there. I wasn't going to follow up the question. That was the only question I had. Because I wouldn't, because just like on this program, I wasn't going to ask another question. But I thought that was a key question. Now, people came up to me after that and said, "Fuller, how did you think to even ask a question like that?" I said, "The question should be obvious." I said, the answer ain't obvious because the answer I got so far doesn't tell me anything. Oh, wow, one answer. The other answer is I pass. So that's what I'm leaving here with. After 4 hours, that's all I'm leaving here with. So what does that mean? It means just what I just said. Came here to see what the seminar was about, and that's what I'm leaving here with. Oh, wow, and I pass. So that's it.
Okay.
Take it for whatever you think it's worth.
Okay.
That's what I have to say to everybody else in the world.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, let's do this. From the call-in line, Beyond, you are now on with Mr. Fuller, and you can be heard worldwide. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Good morning. I just want to give a VGQ statement this morning.
Okay.
Mr. Bobby and Mr. Folder, I think you guys have been doing a wonderful job to take your time to come on air every Tuesday and share with our people what we need to be doing. It's very critical because sometimes a lot of people would say, why do we always talk about things? What are we going to do every day? Talk. But it's important to talk because it's through talking that people can actually understand the condition that we are faced with and how we can muster the courage to be able to do something about it. So I really appreciate you and Mr. Porter. And as a non-white person from the continent of Africa, I have learned so much, and I've been able to have a sense of direction since I came to this country, and I started to listen to Mr. Porter's work and read Mr. Porter's work. It makes a lot of sense to me. I am more constructive. My goal is actually, I went to school in the U.S. here, but my goal is to go back to the continent of Africa and be able to start a manufacturing program, more like a manufacturing company, to be able to produce food, mass farming, and produce food and canned food, because I realize it's a problem back home. So I want to be able to solve that problem, which is what Mr. Porter always talked about. So I thank you so much, and I thank you, Mr. Porter, for helping me to think better and see things better and be able to be a problem solver. So thank you, gentlemen. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your VGQ, Beyond, and do not be a stranger. Okay, let's go to Equani. Let me see if I can get you up here, Equani. I'm push the button here. There we go, Equani. What is your question for Mr. Fuller, and you can be heard?
Peace and power, Hotep, Uncle Jocelyn, family. How is everybody?
Good, sir. Go ahead, sir. Mm-hmm.
I was just basically stating I definitely agree with what the last caller was just speaking about. And my question and my concern had been on one that's kind of lodged in over the past couple of weeks. We have a lot of the newcomers. And I'm going to just share with you guys my experience. The quote-unquote Black Lives Matter movement, rather than it being a one where I'm seeing that is, where you see the black participation is one where, LGBT, the LGBT community, you got white folk, everybody else that is a part of this movement. And, to me, that is potentially dangerous. My question is that how important is it to connect ourselves? Because you hear a lot of people say, well, hey, there's nothing that there's no use to living in the past. You can't live in the past. And when we look at the European culture and we look at how they reenact certain wars and they do certain reenactments, and in their portrayal of history is the one where they glorify, their, the rights or the wrongs of their ancestors, even where we carry around money with the faces of white ancestors on them. How important is it for us as Africans, in order to go forward, to go backwards inside connecting the dots? Because a lot of us have it in the dots with our ancestors, not only on this continent, but as the brother said, even on the mother continent in Africa, connecting ourselves to a lineage and promoting that via our culture and also our education.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, did you understand the question?
If I understand the question, within the codified context, is what this whole discussion is about. What is that? 2 words: problem solving. You'll hear me say that over and over again. You're either going to do something constructive or non-constructive. I don't care who you are. I mean, you don't have to put it in the context of white, non-white. Of course, you keep that in mind, but you don't have to. You can just look at everything that everybody's doing and ask one question, because all problems are solved all over the universe through the process of questions and answers. And you just stand back and say, okay, we're all assembled here now. Now the question is, what are we going to do? And the next question is, after we do what we do, is it going to produce a constructive result or a non-constructive result? Either it's going to solve a problem or it's going to make one. Which is it? Take your choice. No wiggle room, regardless of who's present. You can address any assembly that way, anytime. You can do it blindfolded. You can just say, hey, are we going to solve a problem? If we are, what is the problem we're going to solve? Okay? Because it's either the result of what we're here for is going to be constructive or non-constructive. There's no such thing as in between. It's going to produce a constructive result or a non-constructive result. So we don't have to get into some long-winded discussion about kente cloth or ancestors or none of this other thing. The white supremacists always come ready for that. And they know how to have a 10-day conference, take up a whole lot of space and a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy having conventions, just talking all over the place, when everything has to amount to just one thing. Either every minute that you spend saying anything is it going to produce a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect? Because there's no such thing as anything between. It's either going to be constructive or non-constructive. It's either going to solve a problem or it isn't. That's it. You know, a person starts talking about, well, we got so-and-so and we got this and so-and-so went and did that last week, and the white supremacists, they embrace that type of interaction. Whole lot of words, millions of words. Everybody coming to the podium. Everybody got something to say about everything that ever was, okay? But when you leave there, you ask one question. Was any problem solved out of all of that? All of that 9 days of convention. Everybody all dressed up, everybody moving around, everybody with a Afrocentric this and Afrocentric that, and white people coming around saying, well, we believe in civil rights and we believe in this and that. What problem did you solve? What problem did you solve? Any? Give me the list of problems that you solved. Otherwise, that 15-day conference was absolutely worthless. And so, and I guess an answer to the question is, like some of the things I jotted down just recently because I try to stay focused on codification. When you're talking to white people, because the caller mentioned something about white people coming around, and they say Black Lives Matter. So you have your questions ready. You talk to an individual white person. If you're talking to one, do Black Lives Matter to you? That's the question. Because all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. And be ready not to argue about any of the answers that you get. But just ask a white person, do Black Lives matter to you? Next question, why do Black Lives matter to you? If they say that Black lives do matter to me, because I'm carrying a sign saying Black Lives Matter. Okay, so why do Black Lives matter to you? Third question, Black Lives matter to you. Underline which? Because are you talking about all Black lives matter to you? Every black person's life matters to you? Or maybe there's some Black lives matter to you. So I just want to know which ones, because it might include me, you know. How do these Black lives matter to you, and in regards to what areas of activity? Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, and on and on. But in answer to the question, I hope that the caller and other people listening get how that goes. That's what I mean by instant codification.
Okay.
You immediately go into the question mode.
Okay.
Oh, Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter to you? Okay. If Black Lives matter to you, how do these Black Lives matter to you? Which one of these Black Lives matter to you? All of them? Some of them? One of them? Is that one me? And how does that matter to you? Now that my Black life matters, what are you going to do to prove that my life matters to you? See, these are questions. Everybody just stands around chanting slogans, fists in the air. Speaker after speaker come through the platform. Much time and energy is expended and a lot of money. Nobody asks anybody a single question. That's got to stop. Everything is about questions and answers. Everything. No exceptions. That's throughout the universe. We ought to have learned that by now. If you're going to get anything done, have nothing but questions and answers. That's it. Questions and answers. Not a whole lot of pretty speeches about come by y'all and fist bumping and high fives and hugs and balloons. The white supremacists, they thrive off of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come with questions and answers, everything moves real fast.
Real fast.
Real fast.
Imani, thank you for your call, and as I always say to everyone, do not be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, you have stated this on this program and almost, as a matter of fact, every program that you and I have done together, you have stated this. And in my observations, I have found out that this goes over a lot of people's head because they don't take time to dissect the statement, but it's a true statement, and I know that when I first became acquainted with you, it went over my head for a while, but one day it just really hit me what you were saying. And that statement is the statement that you say on every program. It's in the front of the book, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. It's right at the very beginning, before you open up the pages of the book. And again, you have said this on today's program, but for those who have just tuned in, for those who are not familiar with what is being said or what is being suggested, because Mr. Fuller, these are all he's making suggestions. You don't have to do these things, but these are suggestions of what to do. But Mr. Fuller, could you make that opening statement that you it says here in 1971 you have said this, but you say it on every program, and you've even said it on this program about if you don't understand. Could you just say that so that those that haven't heard it, or maybe those who have heard it, can dissect it to get the what you're saying?
Yes. If you do not understand white supremacy, which is racism, I have that in parentheses. White supremacy is racism. Racism is white supremacy. That's it. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Okay, now explain that to those that heard you read that, probably went over it, but don't understand. Explain that in your words what that means. I mean, it's self-explanatory, but explain that to those who are just tuning in and they heard you make this statement.
There is a political and religious system, the most powerful political and religious system in recorded history, and that is called the religion or the politics, you might say, or the system of white supremacy. There's no religion stronger than the system of white supremacy. There's no political system stronger in recorded history than the political system called the system of white supremacy. And what is white supremacy? Domination and mistreatment of non-white people in the known universe, in every area of activity, every minute of every day. If you don't understand how that system works, what it is, which is dominating and mistreating of people classified as white against people who are classified as non-white, if you don't understand how that system works in all areas of activity, economics, entertainment, education, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, if you don't understand how that system works in all of those areas of activity, everything else that you understand will confuse you. Because the most powerful system that affects everybody on the planet, if you don't understand what that system is and how it works, you're going to be confused in every move that you make. I don't care what you're doing, what you set out to do. You say, well, I don't have time to be bothered with racism and all that stuff. I got other things to do. Well, racism, if you're a person of color, has something to do with you. And even if you're white, you're born into the system of white supremacy. So you have your assignment right out of the womb, and that is to dominate and mistreat people who are classified as non-white. That's your assignment. And about that time, the average white person on the planet gets to be around 15 or 16 years old without even being told anything. They just follow the example of what's going on around them. And they become racist. See, not being a racist is something that a white person has to work at, because you're born in a prison system called the system of white supremacy, and you're a member of that royal class that you're born in, which is the white supremacist class. And your job is to dominate and mistreat people who have color in their skin. That's your job.
All right.
You know that. So now, if you don't understand this, if non-white people don't understand that, you got a bunch of confused people. And confused people always have to be led or jerked around or whatever you want to call it by somebody who's not confused. And the white supremacists are the least confused people on planet Earth here in 2020. Those white people who believe in, who are dedicated to the system of white supremacy, are the smartest and most powerful people in recorded history.
Okay,
if we don't understand that, we're already lost.
Now, in discussing just that with people, let's do this. It did catch up on me. You're listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am the co-host, Mr. Bobby. This is the 10:30 break. It did sneak up on me. But anyway, that's what you're listening to, the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. It's also called the CRCS, same thing. And you're welcome to participate in the call by calling 516-453-9921. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. It will not be read today, but on a future program, it will be read. I will give you the time and the date of when it is addressed. And also you can join in the chat room, as a few people have, and they will give me the information as it comes up. But those are the numbers that you can call and get in with the show. We have about 30 minutes left in the show. This is a 2-hour program heard every Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the concept in the Northwestern Hemisphere called the United States. Mr. Fuller, continuing on that statement, that if you don't understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. You wrote this in 1971. Now, in order to make a statement like that, and I have heard you use this word before, but for those who haven't, you made that statement, I would say, based on the evidence that the white supremacist has done or do?
Yes. And there are people who say there's no such thing as white supremacy. And so I ask questions. I don't say that. I don't argue about it. The code doesn't allow me to be in an argument. See, the arguments are out when you start talking about codification. Questions and answers are in, because a conversation is about questions and answers. That's the difference between a conversation and an argument. The mechanics in a conversation is about questions and answers. That's why people who have questions and answers, like scientists do, everything runs smooth when you just stick to questions and answers. Because every question has an answer, even if the answer is I don't know, which is an incentive right there to do what? To find out what you don't know. Because that's what you call progress, finding out what you don't know. So how do you find out what you don't know? First of all, by raising a question and then finding the answer to the question that you raised. That's it. So that eliminates argument. So codification is about what is who controls things. Do the black people of the planet try to go where white people are in order to be educated? Yes or no? That's a question. Do the black people of the entire planet go to where the white people are in order to be, quote, unquote, educated? Yes or no? That's a question. See, there's something magical about questions and answers, but it's really not magic. It's science. Okay? So black people can think about that. White people can think about it. Are white people flocking to black people? Which way did the black people go so I can get my education? Or is it the other way around? Which is it? See, codification is about coming right to the point real fast. Real fast. And by the point, we mean get to the truth. Get to the truth. I mean, at a slam dunk. No dribbling down the court. Codification is not about dribbling. Every time you touch the ball, it's a slam dunk. From where you are, anywhere on the court. Not going to take up people's time and energy. Codification is about that. That's what we need. That's why we need a code where everything is a slam dunk.
Okay. Here's a question from Dina. It says this: Mr. Fuller, can I logically consider it racist behavior when a suspected racist clutches her purse or clutches her bag when near black people for no apparent reason other than that they are black, and she has been observed not doing that around white people while in a relatively safe area where no crimes usually happen?
The answer is yes, if the person is white, but not for that reason, not for her clutching her purse. I've seen black females clutches their purse. Okay, they better. See, codification is about facing the truth. They better. When I get on the elevator, 3 o'clock in the morning, nobody's around, and, I'm black, she's black, the black lady clutching her purse, I would advise her to do so or try to get off that elevator as fast as she can. Why? Because black males do prey on people who they perceive to be not a threat, an easy take. And some black females do the same thing, truth be told. So in answer to the question, if the white woman does this, when a black person gets on the elevator, do you think that she's a racist? The answer is yes, but not because she clutched her purse. You think that she's a racist because in the system of white supremacy, every white person, every person classified as white, should be suspected of being a racist until proven different. Proven different to whom? To the person who does the suspecting. That's it. If the person is able to be a racist, that's it. Then the person probably is one. The person is born into a racist system, just like black people. There's no system outside of that. If you're classified as black, you are born in a racist system as a victim of racism. You're born a victim, a prisoner of war. You're born in prison. And if you're classified as white, you're automatically born into the royal family of whiteness. That's what it is. It's royalism put on a color basis. That's all racism is. If you understand kings and queens, dukes and earls, and all this other stuff that goes with royalism, emperors and empresses, then you understand white supremacy. If you're born in the royal family, you're royal. You might say, well, I don't want to be royal. Well, you're going to have to abdicate your position because you got it from birth. In the system of white supremacy, you're supposed to be a person who is supreme over people who are classified as non-white. Why? Because the white supremacists that gave birth to you said so. Now, you can take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, when you call that number, 516-453-9921, please, ma'am, please, sir, give your name to the screener so that I can properly introduce you. Otherwise, I don't really know, and we don't know who we are speaking with. So please, when they ask you, give your name. Just like this person here. Now, they have VGQ up here, which is not a name. And maybe you don't have to give your name, but it would be helpful. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can click it in here. Just one moment, please. Okay. Okay. Whoever you are, and I mean no disrespect, I don't know who you are, but it just says VGQ in the name slot. I'm going to allow this to happen. So VGQ, you are on. Go ahead.
No, I told you I didn't want to talk because it's nothing but arguing. I'm just going to listen.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay, they didn't have that up there. They just said VGQ. Okay, all right. Thank you, and thank you for your. Let me see if I can get him off here so he can listen here. Okay, and thank you for that. Hopefully, this is not an argument because that's one thing we don't want to do, is argue. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this is from a brother from Spain. He has two questions. Like I said, this is a worldwide program, so everybody listens. He said, Mr. Fuller, I hope that you and your family are well hidden history. Recently, I completed research about Spanish gypsies, and I discovered that the Spanish church, government, and crown made a plan to eradicate them. In turn, the gypsies were abused, enslaved, and disenfranchised. They were forced to build boats that helped the Spanish conquer South America and enslaved Africans. My question is, how can the hidden history we discover help us learn how to dismantle the system of racist white supremacy?
How can hidden history help us to dismantle the study of it?
How can hidden history we discover help us to learn how to dismantle the system of racist white supremacy?
Well, what we do is just say history, period. What's the purpose of history? The purpose of history, according to the code, is to find out where mistakes were made. See, the good stuff will take care of itself. The main reason for studying the past is to find out what mistakes were made in the past that should not be repeated in order to achieve what? In order to achieve a world without mistakes. That's code. So you don't have to segment history, because when people ask me about, as a question, here again, I'm saying all problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. People have asked me, Fuller, how much do you know about your history? And I say, very, very little. Very little. Even if I would exist for the next 10 million years, I would still know almost nothing about my history. Why? According to the code. Why is it that if I existed for another 10 million years, I would know very little about my history? From this point, 10 million years, that's considered a long time. And then I would look back and actually remember everything that had happened, and then say, I know very little about my history, 10 million years of it, in detail. Why would I say that? Is that true? Yes, that is true. Why? Because the code says, when people ask Neely Fuller, I go according to the code, what is my history? Definition of my history. My history is everything that ever happened before the beginning of time and since.
Okay.
And that's what is recommended in the code book that everybody should say when you start talking about history.
Okay.
Your history is everything that ever happened. I mean, every grain of sand that ever blew through the air, every drop of water that ever flew up out of the ocean 40 trillion years ago. That's a part of your history. Why? Because it happened. That's why.
Okay. All righty. This is Aaron from Spain continuing. He's speaking now on Black Lives Matter. He said, recently I spoke to a black person about my concerns about the organization Black Lives Matter, i.e. promotion of LGBTQ, the organization being funded by suspected racist white supremacists, in the quote, I guess you could say. I was told that I had less backbone than the white people that protested because I did not want to attend the Black Lives Matter protest. Mr. Fuller, my question is this. Why is it that some black people avoid the truth at all costs, even when the evidence is presented?
You have to ask the black person. That individual. See, everything comes down to the individual person. That's what codification is about. That's why it's called a united independent. That independent means the same as individual. Compensatory code system concept. So, whatever person is involved is the person supposed to have the answers to whatever they're involved in. So you ask questions of the person who is involved, and that person provides the answer. That's the compensatory codified way, because that gets to the truth quicker than any other route, and it gets to the answers to the questions.
Okay. All righty. I tell you what we're going to do. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron from Spain. Keep on listening, my brother. Okay, Mr. Fuller, this is the second time that we do this, but it is also a most important time that we do this, and that is at 10:45 here in the concept Northwestern Hemisphere called the United States. We speak about your book. So take it away, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, everything we're talking about on this program, something pertaining to it for sure, will be in the textbook workbook for victims of white supremacy, called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Also, I added a third title just to try to cover everything, a Compensatory Counter-Racist Code, because I say that's what we need. That's the missing link. When I say we, I'm talking about the non-white people of the world, the people who are considered the victims of a racist system that has dominated the behavior of the people of the entire planet ever since its inception, whenever that was, the system of white supremacy. So this book is supposed to be designed to help a person who is a victim of that system, which never should have existed, to not be a victim, to get rid of the system itself and replace it with a system of justice, because the system of racism is set up to produce and maintain non-justice. That's what it is. So you replace something that shouldn't be with something that should be. And this book is designed, supposed to be, to help the individual person to do that. And if enough individuals do it, following a code of thought, speech, and action, things that you do, things that you don't do, how to go about doing it wherever you happen to be, what's the best way to think about it first before you do it, and speak about it before you act on it, and that's what the book is designed for. But you can get the book by going to producejustice.com, producejustice.com.
Okay.
Now, 3 volumes will come up on the screen, and that's all explained why they're there when you go to that website, producejustice.com. But it's for people who perceive themselves to be victims of this system that should not exist, called the system of white supremacy.
Yes, sir. Okay, Khalif and again Africani, they have joined the conversation in the chat room. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, this comes from Khalif. He says this: hello, Mr. Fuller, and good day. The information you give is very powerful, and thank you. In 1955, Muddy Waters recorded a song called Mannish Boy, a very popular song even to this day, in which he stated on the day he was born, his mother told him he will be the greatest man alive. He also repeats that he's a man. He's a full-grown man, and he is a natural-born lover's man. I often play this song to tease a female friend of mine. She says, quote, "That's what's wrong with us men now. We still act like boys," end of quote. I often heard you say, Mr. Fuller, that we can't be grown men in this system, in which I agree, because we don't own or control anything. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you, and have a nice day. Side note, I was not born until many years after that song was made, so I guess that would go under VGQ. But I have heard you say that statement before, that in the system, note, in the system, of racism, which is white supremacy, blacks cannot and are not considered men. For those that just tuned in or are new to the program, can you explain what you mean by that?
In the system of white supremacy, you don't have a person in the form of a male who qualifies for the title of man. Man means manager. Black people, black males, don't manage anything. Slaves don't manage anything. We're not managers. Racism is slavery. We are subject to a slave system. We say slavery ended in the northwestern hemisphere in 1865. No, it didn't. As long as you have white supremacy, you got slavery, because white supremacy is slavery. It's the strongest, most efficient form of slavery ever thought up in the minds of people of the known universe. And the men in the system of white supremacy are all white. The only men on the planet are classified as white. There are no non-white men in the system of white supremacy. They are all slaves. They are all boys. There's no such thing as manhood in the hood, so to speak. You can't be a man in the system of white supremacy. You got to get rid of the system of white supremacy in order to start growing into manhood. You're kept in the status of a boy, and the black female is kept in the status of a girl, because that's what prisoners of war are. You're in a position. It doesn't have anything to do with the calendar. It doesn't have anything to do with how you see yourself. It has to do with, do you answer to the white supremacists or don't you? That's a question. Do you have to do what they say, Big Daddy and Big Mama? That's who they are.
Yeah.
Okay? You either do what they say or you don't. Which is it? And if you do, and they are white supremacists, then that disqualifies you, if you're a person who is non-white, from being a man or a woman. You are girls and boys. That's what I am. The calendar doesn't matter. You say, well, I was 21 a long time ago. I know I'm a man. No. No. You are victims and subject to people who are men and women. If you're a person of color and you're on this planet called Earth. Now, on some other planet, might be a different thing altogether. But on this one, no person of color, black, brown, red, yellow, is qualified for manhood or womanhood. According to what? Fuller? No, according to the evidence. Can't be subject to white supremacy and be a man or a woman. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me do this. Let me say this. Cleophas, Naomi, okay, thank you. She said, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Afrotology, and George Thompson, I called out your name specifically. I know you're listening. I will get to your concerns or your questions, but it will not be on this show. This particular show, we're running out of minutes. We only have 6, so I want to do you justice. And 6 minutes is not going to do you justice for all 4 of you, but I will get to it. I just wanted to acknowledge that I will get to that in another show. So, hang on in there. And as I always do, especially you, George, I will give you the, when Mr. Fuller answers your question, I will alert you date and time. Okay, let's do this. Black Rent, Mr. Fuller. and I'm going to say this might be VGQ, but anyway, it says that he says this, or they say this. If good people are willing to be evil to get rid of evil, then how can they ever defeat evil? Sometimes you have to behave out of balance to restore balance. Being a good person should not mean just turning the other cheek and allowing evil to flourish. If we are to become universal man and universal woman, then we need to understand that violence will be necessary at times depending on the ferocity of your enemy. This is not immoral, it's righteous. Still learning, Black Rant. Mr. Fuller, Black Rant made this statement, and I don't know who this is, but with your history of living and seeing and being in this system, and I've heard you say that in this system you are still considered a boy in the system of racism, which is white supremacy. Have you seen violence, as Black Rant apparently is suggesting, as sometimes being a necessary thing to do?
Not violence, counter-violence. And that's explained in the war section. That's why I wrote it. 9 areas of activity. That covers that. The 9th area of activity in the textbook. So the caller or the person who's made these statements and raised this question can go to the 9th area of activity in the textbook, the 2016 edition. And how to be counter-violent is all explained in that. I usually don't talk about it on air because it's very detailed. But it's not violence, and it's not nonviolence. It's counter-violence. Violence against those who are violent, because the system of white supremacy itself is violence. It's the worst form of violence in recorded history. So there's a way to be counter-violent, but that's outlined in the 9th area of activity in the book for victims of white supremacy that you can get by going to producejustice.com. So the caller can read that section. The 9th area of activity. It covers that. You have violence in the form of white supremacy, and if the caller is talking about how do you counter that violence, do you use violence to counter that violence? No. You use counter-violence to counter violence. You have violence, then you have counter-violence, and then the other form of violence is violence, rather non-violence, rather. You have violence, you have non-violence, you have counter-violence. The 8th area of activity covers counter-violence, which is violence against those who are violent. But that's in the 8th area. Okay. And it's explained in detail how it should be done according to codified methods.
All righty. Looks like we have come to just about the end of the program, so let me say this. Afro-astrology, it looks like your question will be the first question that we ask next week, 7/21/2020. But for everybody else, let me say this. Thank you for listening, Mr. Fuller and myself and all my producers, Moon Pie, everybody. We thank you for listening. Thank you for your calls. We'll try to do better the next time. But thank you. Be blessed and be safe. Please be safe. We'll see you next week on the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller and co-host Mr. Bobby. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. And thanks to listeners.